That spring on the Western Front, British soldiers were finally issued steel helmets, making them the last major army to do so. Trench warfare caused many head injuries, because soldiers were often hit by flying debris. The German steel helmet, the French Adrian helmet, and the British Mark I helmet all offered only limited protection, mainly against shell splinters and shrapnel, not direct hits. At this time, Portugal was neutral, but it had been working closely with Britain. Portugal hoped this cooperation would help protect its African colony, Portuguese Angola. In response, on March 9th, Germany declared war on Portugal. On the Eastern Front, Russia launched an attack near Lake Narek. The goal was to reduce pressure on the French army fighting at Verdun. However, the operation was a complete failure. Around 100,000 Russian soldiers were killed or wounded, and the attack did not force Germany to move any troops away from Verdun. In Ireland, Irish Republicans began an armed uprising against British rule in Dublin. This event became known as the Easter Rising. After 6 days of intense street fighting, British forces crushed the rebellion. In the Middle East, British forces suffered a major defeat. After a 5-month siege, British troops had cut surrender to Ottoman forces. General Townsend led around 9,000 British and Indian soldiers into captivity. Sadly, about half of them later died from starvation, disease, or mistreatment. Britain wanted Arab support in its war against the Ottoman Empire. To gain this support, Britain promised Arab leaders the creation of an independent Arab state after the war. However, at the same time, Britain and France secretly signed the Sykes-Picot Agreement. This secret deal planned to divide the Middle East into British and French zones of control after the war. Not knowing about this agreement, Hussein bin Ali, the Sheriff of Mecca, led an Arab revolt against Ottoman rule. During the Battle of Mecca, Arab forces successfully captured the holy city of Mecca from Ottoman control. On the Italian front, Austro-Hungarian forces launched a surprise attack at Asiago. Italian defenses collapsed, and Austro-Hungarian troops were close to breaking through into northern Italy, putting the country in serious danger. That same month in the North Sea, the German High Seas Fleet fought the British Grand Fleet in the Battle of Jutland. This was the only major naval battle of the war. The British suffered greater losses in ships and sailors, but they claimed victory because the German fleet retreated. After this battle, the German Navy did not leave its base again for the rest of the war. During the summer of 1916, the Allies planned large, coordinated offensives against the Central Powers from both the East and the West. These attacks were now urgently needed to relieve pressure on the French at Verdun and on the Italians at Asiago. The Russian army attacked first on the Eastern Front. General Alexei Brusilov carefully prepared his forces and kept his plan secret. When the attack began, Russian troops broke through enemy lines in several places. In some areas, they advanced up to 60 miles and captured around 200,000 enemy prisoners. Although the attack was very costly, the Brusilov offensive was a major success. It forced the Central Powers to move troops from other fronts, helping to ease pressure on their enemies. At sea, tragedy struck Britain. The British cruiser HMS Hampshire, traveling to Russia, hit a mine and sank near the Orkney Islands. About 650 people were killed, including Lord Kitchener, Britain's famous Secretary of State for War. 3 days later, in the Adriatic Sea, the Italian troop ship Principe Umberto was sunk by a submarine, causing heavy loss of life. A German submarine attack causes the deadliest sinking of the war, with around 1,900 people losing their lives. This tragedy shows how dangerous naval warfare has become. On the Western Front, Britain and France launched their main summer offensive, known as the Battle of the Somme. The Allies hope this attack will finally break through the German lines. At first, spirits are high, but the plan quickly turns into a disaster. A long Allied artillery bombardment fails to destroy German defenses. When British soldiers move forward into no man's land, they are met with deadly machine gun fire. In just a few hours, the British Army suffers 57,000 casualties, and about one-third of them are killed. This becomes the worst single day in the history of the British Army. Despite the terrible losses, the fighting does not stop. Commanders order more attacks, and the Battle of the Somme continues for another 5 months. Encouraged by Russian successes on the Eastern Front, Romania joins the Allies. At first, Romanian troops advance into Transylvania. However, their success is short-lived. Soon, German, Bulgarian, and Austro-Hungarian forces launch a powerful counteroffensive, pushing Romania back. The Allied army at Salonika tries to help Romania by starting its own offensive toward Monastir. Serbian troops lead the attack, and although they gain some ground, strong Bulgarian resistance prevents any major breakthrough. On the Western Front, German General Erich von Falkenhayn finally ends the attack on Verdun. The French army has kept its promise, made by General Nivelle, that they shall not pass. France holds the line, but the victory comes at a terrible cost. The French suffer around 365,000 casualties, and German losses are almost the same. The Battle of Verdun remains one of the bloodiest battles in human history. Because of the failure of Verdun, Falkenhayn is removed from command. Germany's famous generals from the Eastern Front, Paul von Hindenburg and Erich Ludendorff, take control of operations in the West. Meanwhile, the Battle of the Somme continues. Near the village of Flers, the British introduce a new weapon that they hope will end trench warfare. This weapon is the tank. Although the tanks achieve some small successes, there are too few of them and they often break down mechanically, so they do not change the course of the battle. On the Eastern Front, the Brusilov offensive comes to an end. The number of casualties is uncertain, but it is clear that both sides suffer enormous losses. Neither the Russian army nor the Austro-Hungarian army ever fully recovers from this fighting. On the Italian front, heavy fighting continues throughout the autumn. Italian forces repeatedly attack Austro-Hungarian positions along the Isonzo River, but these assaults are very costly and gain little ground. As autumn rain turns the battlefield into mud and misery, the Battle of the Somme finally ends. The Allies have advanced only about 10 miles, but they have suffered around 600,000 casualties. German losses are estimated at about 450,000. Despite this, Allied leaders convince themselves that the strategy will work, believing that Germany will run out of soldiers first. At the same time, Romania faces disaster. The country is overrun by the Central Powers, and Romanian forces suffer around 250,000 casualties. What remains of the Romanian army retreats and takes positions alongside Russian troops on the Eastern Front. On the front of the war, important changes take place during the winter. That winter, Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria, who had ruled since 1848, dies after a very long reign. After his death, he is succeeded by his grandnephew, Karl, who becomes the new emperor. Karl inherits a country that is tired, weakened, and deeply affected by war, and he faces the difficult task of leading Austria-Hungary during this hard time. In Britain, there is also a major political change. Prime Minister H. Asquith is forced to leave office because many people believe his government is not managing the war well. He is replaced by David Lloyd George, who becomes a new prime minister. Lloyd George promises stronger leadership and more effective action to help Britain win the war. In France, the army leadership changes as well. General Joffre, who had been commander-in-chief of the French army, is replaced by General Robert Nivelle. Nivelle promises that he can achieve victory through bold and aggressive attacks, giving the French people hope that the war might soon turn in their favor. During this time, U.S. President Woodrow Wilson tries to bring the war to an end through diplomacy. He offers to act as a mediator and encourages both sides to negotiate a peace settlement. However, his efforts fail. Neither the Allies nor the Central Powers are willing to make concessions or compromise, as both sides still believe they can win the war. As the conflict continues with no clear end in sight, the war enters another uncertain and dangerous year. Today, History Academy depends on the support of fellow history lovers. If you enjoy our content and want to help us continue, please consider supporting the channel. You can pledge as little as $1 per video through the channel's Patreon page. Your support helps us keep history alive and accessible for everyone.